we've been watching animation for the last 30 years, especially anime, and it's really easy, especially in the design front, to start going angular. We're like, no, 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 soft curves,
Right.
the big bubbly muscles. We had to really hold ourselves accountable over and over again to stick to that 90s aesthetic.
Brad, I've been waiting. I'm sure you've heard this a lot, but I've been waiting for over 2 decades for this show, and it is finally here. When I saw that first episode, that intro alone, it drew me right back in, and I felt like I was a kid again, straight up. And it was crazy because it's a sense of nostalgia, but it also felt so fresh and new, and the animation is gorgeous. Fantastic job. Let me just say that right off the bat. Fantastic job.
Thanks, man.
Obviously, the show came out before the wild success of the movies and the boom of the modern superhero movie genre. How do you balance continuing the feel of a decades-old cartoon with the experience and expectations audiences who've been exposed to a lot of X-Men and other superhero medias before?
I think we make our best work when we do what we love. And I love X-Men, the animated series.
Me too.
We had just released What If. It was a success. It opened up the door for us to make more animation. And this was like the first idea out of the box. I was like, can we revive the original X-Men, the animated series? And Kevin was like, we can, but it's a great idea, but we need two things. Otherwise, it's not worth doing. And that was the cast and the music.
Yes.
Luckily, we got them both.
X-Men the Animated Series was greatly viewed as a standalone series, but was a bigger part of a shared universe at Marvel animated TV shows during that era, with some stories and characters crossing over. Was X-Men 97 developed with a wider Marvel universe in mind, animated universe in mind? And is that something, if not, is that something we can explore in the future?
X-Men 97 fits directly into the continuity of the 90s animated shows. And as you know, like, there were some awesome crossovers, most notably with Spider-Man. I will say that, like, if you remember the awesome cameos from the original show, you're going to be happy in X-Men 97 without going into spoiler territory.
Oh,
it's an exciting timeline to explore that 90s world.
I mean, that's what got me into comics is that version of the X-Men. X-Men 97 is releasing alongside the X-Men's budding introduction into the MCU. Did that change the way certain storylines were handled or how specific characters were imagined?
No. Honestly, like, being able to stay in the 90s was like liberating. We were able to do whatever we wanted as long as it was like the 90s, which is what the whole idea of the show is. So there were no limitations put on the show, except for the limitations we put on ourselves, which were mostly creative ones, because we were trying to emulate this style that was made with technology from 30 years ago, using our modern tools. So we were like always, trying to put artificial limiters on ourselves to like a kind of a code of ethics to hold to that kind of 90s aesthetic. That's why it was so important that we brought back Larry Houston in particular, but also Eric and Julia Lewald. They were able to tell us how they made the OG show so that we could guide ourselves into like, all right, well, they would not have been able to move the camera like that back then, so we shouldn't do it. They wouldn't have had like that kind of dynamic. We're all fans of, we've been watching animation for the last 30 years, especially anime, and it's really easy, especially in the design front, to start going angular. We're like, no, 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 soft curves, the big bubbly muscles. We had to really hold ourselves accountable over and over again to stick to that 90s aesthetic.
Now, look, you guys did my Scott Summers is my favorite superhero of all time. He is my favorite, not just X-Man, he is my favorite superhero of all time. And you guys did right by my boy, Scott Summers. What can fans expect from Scott's journey in this new season of X-Men 97?
He's an orphan. He deals with abandonment issues. I think he vowed to be a good father. And that's why he looks up to Xavier. It's one of the reasons, if I'm going to psychoanalyze Scott for a second, it's one of the reasons why he looks up to Xavier. And unfortunately, in dramatic X-Men fashion, he finds himself with his worst nightmare coming true, and forcing to deal with the ramifications. Now, with that said, that pendulum swing is very deep. when it pays off, it pays off in a major emotional way towards the end of the season, that leading to one of my favorite moments in the show, actually. Which I won't spoil for you, but you got a lot to look forward to.
I'm gonna tell you right now, episode 2 legit brought me to tears. I'm gonna tell you, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody out there, but legitimately, I was shocked. Now let me ask you this: 2 of my favorite episodes that always stand. I just binged the animated series again all last week, the whole 5 seasons. Wow. 2 episodes that really stand out for me was Cold Comfort with Bobby Drake and X Factor, and Nightcrawler. What can we expect from the latter? Because we do know that Nightcrawler is going to be in the season at some point.
You know, there's certain characters that like really stand out in your memory of the OG show. Bishop being probably the biggest one, and like you kind of imagine him being part of the ensemble, even though he was a guest star, and that's why we were like, Bishop's part of the ensemble now, just because that's what we remember. We also remember Morph being part of the ensemble.
Sure.
You know, like, so they're more front and center. And I would actually put Kurt on that list as well. Impactful character in the comics, certainly. I mean, that 90s era is you know, Kurt and Kitty, you know,
yeah.
and all the Excalibur stuff. So we love Kurt. We're excited to have Nightcrawler come back. He plays a major part in the show, and he takes center stage in the ensemble at times.
I got to thank you, Brad, for your time, but also for making this show, because I have an 8-year-old now who's watching this version of the X-Men, and it's such a shared experience because now I also feel like a kid when I'm watching this version of the X-Men. So thank you for letting me have that experience. I really appreciate you, man.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate you, man.